gracias a la plataforma Symposium que nos sponsoría y fue tan agradable en darnos ese soporte. Por favor, active sus aplicaciones de Facebook y YouTube el botón de traducción en idioma español para que puedan gozar de esta presentación que vamos a hacer en este momento, que es el Ipcc, el código de reporte, que ustedes ya saben que dio alerta roja a la humanidad. Welcome once again to the last table of this academic congress, Global Academic Congress, right now here with the second environmental law encounter from FIDA, AIDA, and COPLADA, the Forum International of Environmental Law and the Encounter International of Environmental Law, and also the Planetary Congress of Environmental Law. We are here with a great, exceptional table with amazing, talented, skilled guest speakers from Mexico, United States, and two amazing women that I am honored to have here. Today, our topic, last topic of this international coordination will be Ipcc reports. Everybody knows all the news around it with the COP26 Glasgow and also the United Nations that we are in red alert, code red for humanity, for this global warming across the globe. So we are having fantastic women. I am honored to be saying they are women here to talk about the Ipcc reports. Hello, Deborah Lay, how are you? And hello, Ruth Cerezo Mota, how are you?
Good, thank you, Neil. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Hi, Carrie. Thank you. Thank you again for the invitation.
Thank you so much for both of you. Before we start our presentation, that I am so excited about it, we're going to learn, we're going to have wisdom from you, and we are going to be so blessed by everything you're going to tell us here. So thank you so much. God bless your lives. I'm going to introduce to the public Deborah Lay first, and then Ruth. Is that okay with you?
Yes.
Awesome. Dr. Deborah Lay is Economic Affairs Officer of the Energy and Natural Resources Unit of the UN Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, sub-regional headquarters in Mexico. She is lead author for IPCC's 6th Assessment Report Working Group 2 and lead author of Chapter 4 of IPCC's Special Report on Global Warming at 1.5 grade Celsius, focusing on adaptation, sustainable development, and renewable energy. She has a DPhil in Geography and Environment from the University of Oxford, an MACC in Civil Engineering from the University of Colorado Boulder, USA, and a BSc in Electromechanical Engineering. She has worked at Sandia National Laboratories in the US and has been a consultant with World Bank, Inter-American Development Bank, Chemonix, Latin America Energy Organization, amongst others, focusing on topics of renewable energy, energy poverty, rural electrification, sustainable development, and climate change mitigation and adaptation. She is also a volunteer with Engineers Without Borders, Sense and Sustainability, and an editor for the Journal of Regional Environmental Change. Wow, Debbie, you've done a lot. And the best is yet to come, right? So tell me, what are you going to present to us right now?
I want to give you all a brief overview of what IPCC does and then share with you the main results of the IPCC Special Report on Global Warming at 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is part of the 6th assessment cycle. So the cycle had 3 special reports and then the 3 reports from each one of the working groups. So I'll present on the side of the special reports.
Yes, please. Can you share screen?
Yes.
Ruth, please be with us.
Of course, of course.
Thank you.
Yes, can you see my screen now?
Yes, perfect, thank you.
Great, so as I mentioned a moment ago, I want to present highlights of this report, which was released in October 2018. And here are just a few details of IPCC. The IPCC is based on peer-reviewed literature. This is a quality check for the information in the report. And IPCC studies are all policy relevant, but not policy prescriptive. So basically, the IPCC is not telling governments what to do, but does provide factual information. The Scientific Climate Change Panel of the UN member governments that defines which reports will be written and what the outline of the report is. And usually the governments approve the summary for policymakers. So this document cannot contradict the underlying report, but governments agree on it by consensus. So the Ipcc special report is a special report in several senses. And the first one is because this is the first time that member states request the Ipcc to do a study. In this case, it was after the Paris Agreement on what does it mean to have global warming at 1.5 versus 2 degrees, which was what at the time was considered to be the safe level. The other reason is that this is the first time in which the three working groups came together. Working group 1, which is the science of climate change, working group 2, which is on impacts, vulnerability, and adaptation, and working group 3, which is on mitigation. So just to share a few numbers, a few numbers of the report. It had 91 authors from 40 countries, 133 contributing authors, and we assessed 6,000 studies. All of them, these reports go through 2 periods of expert review, and in total we got more than 42,000 comments, all of which had to be responded to, but that actually helped enrich the content. So the first part of the report is understanding global warming and where are we now. So as I mentioned a moment ago, in the Paris Agreement, there was this question of, 2 degrees can get to be too dangerous for certain populations. But what about 1.5? Are we already at 1.5? Can we achieve 1.5? So the question of where we are now sets the stage for the report. And what we can say is that since pre-industrial times, human activities have caused approximately 1 degree C of global warming. This means that we are not yet at 1.5, that we would reach 1.5 between 2030 and 2052, and that past emissions alone do not commit the world to 1.5. So even though we're already seeing consequences for people, nature, and livelihoods, we have the power and the control to make this change to achieve 1.5. So now I'm going to go into the second part of the report, which is on projected climate change and potential impacts and associated risks. So doing a comparison between 1.5 and 2 degrees, we can find that at 1.5 C, there will be less extreme weather where people live, including extreme heats and rainfall. Also, global mean sea level rise will be lower by 2100, around 10 centimeters lower. 10 million fewer people exposed to risks of rising seas. There will also be lower impact on biodiversity and species, and smaller reductions in yields of different crops. The global population exposed to increased water shortages would be up to 50% less, and there will be lower risk to fisheries and livelihoods that depend on them. When we look at the impact that extreme weather events can have on poverty and development goals, we can see that up to several 100 million fewer people will be exposed to climate-related risks and susceptible to poverty by 2050. This figure shows what we call the burning embers, and it shows different natural, managed, and human systems. What we see here, if we can see the top right corner here, is that we have several colors: white, yellow, red, and purple. White being undetectable impacts, yellow, some impacts that are detectable that can be attributed to climate change, red indicated severe and widespread impacts and risks, and purple is very high risks of severe impacts under which some adaptation options might not be effective or feasible anymore because some of these impacts can be irreversible. So in this graph here, we can see the gray line, the horizontal gray line shows where we are right now at a little over 1 degree C. And then we can see the two horizontal lines above that at 1.5 and 2 degrees. And we can see how for certain systems, the change between 1.5 and 2 can mean going to an irreversible change. But on the other hand, we can also see, like for warm water corals, that at 1 degree, we're already at a very high risk. And as we know, some of the changes are already irreversible. We can see, for example, that mangroves and tourism won't have that high in affectation going from 1.5 to 2. But if we look at, again, warm water corals, Arctic region, a few of the small scale, low latitude fisheries, and coastal flooding, some of the changes expected are quite high. And yeah, that would lead to irreversible damage, in which, again, adaptation options will not be effective anymore. This brings us to the type of adaptation that we are carrying out and which we will need to carry out more. So the type of adaptation we are doing right now can be considered as incremental adaptation, in which we maintain the essence and integrity of a system or process. Excuse me, which is kind of what we are doing now, for example, of looking different types of crops that are resistant, for example, to drought. But sometimes, based on the previous graph, that will not be enough, and we will have to move to transformational adaptation, in which we need to change the fundamental attributes of a socio-ecological system in anticipation of climate change and its impacts. So one example that it's already happening in a few countries is communities that are agricultural, that now, because of climate change, they don't have any more crops, and they have changed to growing and selling flowers, or even ecotourism, showing the impacts of climate change. So in those cases, we can consider transformational adaptation. And in achieving or trying to achieve 1.5, we need to use both incremental and then transformational. Now that we've seen the different emission projections, I want to show you some of the different adaptation pathways and system transitions that can help us achieve the 1.5. So to limit greenhouse gas emissions to limit warming to 1.5 degrees, CO2 emissions need to fall by 45% by 2030, compared to 20% if we want to achieve a 2% degree C. To limit warming to 1.5 degrees C, we need to reach net zero around 2050, and that would compare to 2075 for 2 degrees C. This would also require changes at an unprecedented scale, which means deep emissions cuts in all sectors, in a range of technologies involving behavioral changes and increased investments in low carbon options. Progress in renewables will need to be mirrored in other sectors. That is not just for electricity generations. And we will need to start talking about carbon dioxide removal technologies, which will also have implications for food security, ecosystems, and biodiversity. But what we know right now is that national pledges are not enough to limit warming to 1.5 C, and this also includes the new commitments that have been submitted in the run-up to COP26. And that avoiding warming would require CO2 emissions to decline substantially before 2030. So here are some of the different pathways we see, and I want you to look mainly at the difference between the blue lines, or well, the blue range of lines and the gray range of lines. The blue one mentions what I mentioned right now, that we need to start declining by 2030 by 45% to reach net zero by 2050. The gray line shows a decrease that happens after 2030, which needs to be steeper, but in which we achieve net zero after 2050. But as you can see, the line below the zero here, this all means carbon that would need to be removed by CDR technologies. So just to give you a better idea here, we have 4 illustrative model pathways in which you can see going from P1 to P4. that have different levels of overshoot. P1 is where social, business, and technological innovations result in lower energy demand up to 2050. P2 has a broad focus on sustainability with limited societal acceptability for BECCS, which is bioenergy, carbon capture, and storage. P3 is more like our business as usual. It changes the way in which energy and products are produced. There are some reductions in demand. And P4 is a resource and energy intensive scenario in which energy growth and globalization lead to widespread adoption of greenhouse gas intensive lifestyles. So this means that there's a lot of technological means making strong use of carbon dioxide removal through the deployment of bioenergy, carbon capture and storage, and other carbon dioxide removal technologies. So what we can see here, the main difference I want you all to see is the yellow bar at the bottom. You cannot, there wouldn't be any in P1. You see a little bit of it in P2, more so in P3, and a lot in P4. And that's the amount of carbon dioxide removal technologies that will need to be used. The brown lines is of afforestation and reforestation efforts, which we consider natural carbon dioxide removal. And right now we're not talking about huge scales of afforestation and reforestation that would compete with food and water, but that would help to get to net zero when drastic changes and drastic reductions are achieved. So here I want SR 1.5 did a feasibility assessment of options of mitigation and adaptation options and system transitions, going from environmental feasibility, technological, economic, social-cultural, institutional, and geophysical. And one of the changes that we see here is that we don't do a sector by sector analysis, but of system transitions. And we do system transitions because we bring together the social technical transitions that need to happen for mitigation and the socio-ecological resilience that we need for adaptation. Basically bringing together adaptation and mitigation. And when we work along these 6 dimensions, the main message that we want to send is where should policymakers look first for quick wins and what barriers need to be overcome. So going back to the 4 illustrative pathways here, we can see in this segment of the chart that we did for the feasibility assessment, where you can see a column for each one of the dimensions. The darker colors are for higher feasibility, which means low or no barriers. Medium color is medium feasibility, light color is low feasibility. So for example, for each one of the mitigation and adaptation options, we did this assessment. We have a column for what context it's in. Ideally, we wanted to do it at a regional level, but there was not sufficient evidence or literature to support the different regions. However, this is an effort that's currently being undertaken as part of the working group reports for AR6. So here in this graph, we can see, for example, that solar PV applies for all of the different illustrative pathways. Low and zero energy buildings would mainly apply to P1 and P3, but that BECCS assessment mainly applies to P3 and P4. And what we can see here about BECCS is even though we have a combination of low and medium, the social cultural dimension is the one that has the most barriers. So we have this for mitigation, and we also have it for adaptation. You can find this whole assessment in chapter 4. But something to also think about is that we're not implementing options on an individual basis. Part of the rationale for working under system transitions framework is to how you're bringing together mitigation and adaptation and what are the different synergies and trade-offs between them. Now, moving on is to say that despite the feasibility level of an option, we still need critical enabling conditions. Among them is finance and investment, in which we need an additional 2.5% overall of redirection from fossil to low emissions. We need policy instrumentations. We need institutional capacity. We need governance. We need behavior change and public support and technological innovation. And when we consider all these enabling conditions, we find out that, every action matters and every person matters. Every degree matters. So we basically cannot start saying, well, this option is better than the other, and then we should just stick with option A, because in reality, there isn't one single option that will lead us to achieve 1.5, which brings us to the last point, to the last section of this special report, in which to achieve 1.5 degrees, there are close links with the Sustainable Development Goals, not just with the SDGs, but also with the Agenda 2030 and Sustainable Development in general, going beyond 2030. So what we're looking at here is not only the synergies and trade-offs between mitigation and adaptation, but also the different benefits that we can have for the Sustainable Development Goals and the roles that different actors can play to achieve this. And also the very important role that international cooperation has. So this is another one of the figures that SR 1.5 did, that these are indicative linkages between mitigation options and using Sustainable Development Goals. So the example here is on energy supply, energy demand, and land use, also for energy, and the link they have with the different SDGs. So here we see for each one of the SDGs, we can see in blue the levels of synergies and brown the levels of trade-offs. Although 1.5 didn't do this exercise for adaptation, this is something that you can hear more about in March once Working Group 2 contributions to AR6 is released. So in closing, just some of the highlights of the summary for policymakers is that limiting warming to 1.5 degrees would require transformative systemic change integrated with sustainable development, that we need adaptation actions, including transformational adaptation, especially for those pathways that temporarily overshoot 1.5 degrees, such as P3 and P4. That is, overshoot means those pathways that don't do this drastic reduction by 2030, nor reach net zero by 2050. Worth repeating again is that we need a mix of mitigation and adaptation options, that there isn't a single option that will get us to this goal, that we need systemic transitions in energy, in urban, in land, and in other ecosystems, and that these options and changes are most effective when aligned with economic and sustainable development, and when there is local and regional governments supported by national governments. And that there is increasing evidence that suggests that a climate-sensitive realignment of savings and expenditure towards low emissions, climate-resilient infrastructure and services requires an evolution of global and national financial systems. So thank you very much. This is, again, just a brief overview of 1.5, and I'm happy to answer your questions after Ruth's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. That was a lot of information just to handle, right? Thank you so much. That was like incredible, incredible. Ruth, this is your moment for your presentation, but before that, I'm going to introduce you to the audience so they can know who you are. Okay? You're muted.
Yeah, thank you. Yes.
Okay. Ruth Cerezo Mota received previous in oceanography from the UABC, has an MC in physical oceanography from the SciCSS, and got her PhD in atmospheric, oceanic, and planetary sciences from the University of Oxford, with a postdoc at UCLA and another at the University of Cape Town, South Africa. From 2013 and 2014, she was a lecturer at the Universidad Veracruzana. In September of 2014, she joined the LIPS of the Institute of Engineering, UNAM, as a researcher. She has been working with regional climate models, RCM, for more than 15 years. Her studies are focused on extreme events of precipitation and interannual variability of precipitation over different regions, but mainly over the northwest of Mexico and southwest of Mexico. She was a lead author of the Ipcc Work Group 1 in the R6. That's amazing, Ruth. That's amazing. We are having two talented women here, and I'm so honored to have you here. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your wisdom and learning from you. Yes, Ruth.
Thank you. Thank
All
you.
yours.
Can you confirm that you can see my screen?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, thank you. So, well, thank you to Debbie's presentation that she introduced what is the Ipcc. So I don't have to mention that again. So what I'm going to show you now is the key messages from the report that was presented at the 9th of August. So this is just a very brief presentation of that. So just quickly, we were 2,034 authors from 65 countries, 28% were women, and 30% of those we were new in the Ipcc. For the review processes, we assessed more than 40,000 papers. We received more than 78,000 comments, and for the last round of the document of the report, 46 countries participate on the comment of this report. Here, I just want to show you just so you have like an image, or you can put a face on all the people from Latin America and the Caribbean that participate in this group for this report. So now, without further ado, I'm just going to get in the key messages. So recent changes in the climate are widespread, rapid, and intensifying, and unprecedented in thousands of years. And sorry. And by this, I just want to show you this. This is the time, and this is the difference of temperature relative to this period. And why this period? Because this is when we have the Industrial Revolution. So it's when we start to industrialize everything and we start to burn a lot of fossil fuels. So here is the set time 0, and this is where we are now, 2020. And as you can see, before this period, the changes in temperature were really like small, no more than 0.2 degrees. And when we arrive here, well, now we have this unprecedented warming that has never seen before. And for this warming for you to be able to see this warming before in the history of the planet, you will have to go to the period when there were dinosaurs walking on the surface of the Earth. So now here, I make just a sort of a zoom of this period. So it's again 1950, 2020. And as you can see, now we are 1.1 degrees warmer than we were before. Also, as you can see here, each year is warmer than the previous, and each decade is warmer than the previous one. Because of this rise of the temperature, we have concentration of CO2 at the highest level in at least 2 million years. The rise of the sea level is occurring in faster rates in at least 3,000 years. Arctic sea ice area is at the lowest level in at least 1,000 years. And the glacier retreat is unprecedented in at least 2,000 years. Because of this, again, we are experiencing now extreme heat events, more frequent, more intense, heavy rainfall events, more frequent, more intense, drought increase in some regions in terms of expansion of area and on time as well. We are experiencing now this fire weather, more frequent, as you can see in the latest news. The oceans are warming, acidifying, and losing oxygen. Unless there are immediate, rapid, and large-scale reductions in greenhouse gases emissions, limiting warming to 1.5 degrees will be beyond reach. This is projections, and so we are here right now. And for this report, we have 6 new scenarios. So basically, to not getting in acronyms, one is for very low, intermediate, high, and very high emissions of CO2. As you can see, by 2030, regardless of the scenario, we will reach the 1.5 degrees. However, the difference between going and stick to very low or low scenarios makes a difference that eventually by the end of the century, we will see a reduce of the temperature, whereas in the other any of the scenarios will be go further to 2, 3, or 4 degrees by the end of the century. So with every increment of global warming, changes get larger in regional mean temperature, precipitation, and soil moisture. So just an example, for example, here, when we talk about 1.5 or 2 or 4, we mean the global temperature, the mean global temperature, but it's different. This temperature varies in different regions. So for example, here for our region, for America Latina, you can see here like at 1.5, that would translate that the temperature, the mean temperature will increase further 2 degrees. But if we don't stop the warming and we go further to up to 4 degrees, for this region, it will mean that the mean global temperature can rise up to 7 degrees of what we have now. So that's really bad. It is indisputable that human activities are causing climate change, making extreme climate events, including heat waves, heavy rainfall, and droughts more frequent and severe. Here you have again the 1.1 that I was mentioning. This is the total influence of the human activity. So this first column is a contribution by the greenhouse gases, and this is a cooling effect by masking to that is done by the aerosols. So if you make the addition of this minus this, you get the 1.1. Here is a contribution of natural factors, like, for example, volcanic activity. And this last one is internal variability. So you can see the only thing that can explain the amount of the increment of temperature is the greenhouse gases. Climate change is already affecting every region on Earth in multiple ways. The changes we experience will increase with further warming. So as I said before, each region is seeing or is getting these effects in different way. For this report, we create 45 new regions, so we can do a more sort of regional assessment. Here is a representation of these 45 regions. Here will be like America, here will be Europe, Africa, and so on. These regions, these are for Mexico, Central America, and South America, and you can see in all the regions of the planet, actually, we have already observed changes in the extreme of the hot extreme, so they are increasing already. And now what we are doing with the climate change is that we are increasing the frequency of events that would not happen before, or it will happen on a period of return of 50 years. So now they're having now, instead of having like in the future, they're having now, they're happening more frequent and more intense now in this scenario of climate change. This goes for temperature, this goes for precipitation, and this goes, as I said, for drought. Drought is occurring now more intense and more frequent. That it will happen if there was not this increment of temperature, and in further the temperature increase, more intense these events will occur. As well, for this report, we have developed an interactive atlas. This is the web page for it. So I invite you to visit this web page. You can download graphics. You can see all the data that were used for this report, all the simulation, all the models. You can create your own plots, so you don't have to actually have an algorithm or know how to code or create an algorithm to do this. So it is free access. So please, I invite you to visit this tool. We have created as well these climate impact drivers that it was a sort of summarize how these weather or climate changes will affect some specific aspects, like, for example, coastal and oceanic, open ocean, how would they impact, for example, agriculture or people, water security, and so on. So this was a way for us, the group 1, to sort of land of this physics information and be able to make a sort of translation for then the group 2 and group 3 could actually use all this information in a more sensible way and in a more easy way to translate information. For example, these drivers here, this is made for projections considering a period of 20 or from 20 to 30 years, centered in 2050. So how these drivers would change in the future if we are on the scenario of 2 degrees global warming. And I'm just going to make a zoom on 2 of them that are the ones that affect us in this region, in all Latin America, I mean. And this is, for example, the coastal. Those implies increase in sea level, coastal float, coastal erosion, marine heat waves, ocean acidity. And as you can see, all of them are increasing and are projected to be more frequent and to increase. As well, for the mean surface temperature, obviously, will to increase, and or the occurrence of extreme heat events as well will increase under this scenario for these drivers. There is no going back from some changes in the climate change. Human activities affect all the major climate system compounds, with responding over decades and over others over centuries. So there is, for example, for the rise of the sea level, even if we aim for the lowest emissions scenario, we will still see an increase in the sea level. And this is because oceans react different than the atmosphere. They're like slow. They take longer to heat and they get longer to cool down. So even if we aim for that scenario, we will still see an increase in the sea level. The difference again is how much this is going to how high is going to get this sea level. So for it to be not so bad, we will have to aim for the lowest scenario, for the lowest emissions scenario. However, some changes could be slowed and others could be stopped by limiting warming. To limit global warming, strong, rapid, and sustained reductions in CO2, methane, and other greenhouses are necessary. This will not only reduce the consequences of climate change, but also improve air quality, and which translates in our health. Every ton of CO2 emissions adds to global warming. In the same way, every ton of CO2 that we do not emit will reduce the impacts that we are seeing. So this is, again, the increase of CO2. This is historical. This is the beginning of the side time here in 2020. So this is the level. This is the rapid increase of CO2. And in any scenario, we will still have, because as Debbie said, even if we reduce emissions right now, there is still some time of residence in the atmosphere. So that's why we have to act now, because the future will be still feeling these emissions that we already put in the system. So that's why we have to act now and reduce our emissions now. The climate we experience in the future depends on our actions now. So now is the time to act. So thank you very much. This is the information for the Ipcc. Here you can download the report. You can download as well the summary for policymakers. This is the website for the interactive atlas. As I said, I invite you to get in the webpage and to download and to see how we reach to all these conclusions. All the evidence is there. And this is my email. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to reply them.
Thank you so much, Ruth, for that. So I know we don't have minutes, and you were so wise to make this presentation like this. And they can share this YouTube application channel that we have here with your presentations. It's incredible, all the information that the Ipcc and every one of you do and get together to make these reports for us. And my question is, how long does it take to make these reports?
So for the report of the group 1, well, on 2 and 3, it's going to 3 years.
Yeah, the special reports are like a year and a half, 2 years.
That's a lot of time getting together and just gathering information and just the correct information, right? The truth, I mean, the facts. So if we have these reports, I mean, the governments, the people, the public, the professors, like the legislators, the presidents, what is going on that we are not having less emissions? Like right now, the United Nations just, I had the news and I was very happy about it. I imagine that you know already. There was a report from United Nations that it said that United Nations recognizes the environment to be law for the human being. Like literally, it's going to be like a basic need to be a clean environment to every human being. And it's by the resolution AHRC 48L23 Red 1. So United Nations just said yes for the environment to be a clean one for a basic need of a human being. And to my shock, or not so much, there were 53 yes of the countries and there were 4 absences, like they didn't want to say yes or no. And it was, of course, China, the one that has more emissions, Russia, Japan, India, and United States wasn't there. He didn't say yes or no, he was not there right now. So my question, just to like synthesize this, is like, what is going on that they know this and they don't take action for the reports and information, the facts that you have so much time together and so much effort to gather this information and just make a better world?
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, it's bad that these countries does not vote or abstain. But I think, as Debbie mentioned it, and I think I didn't, but I should have mentioned, all the agreement, all the pledges that were done for the agreement, for the Paris Agreement, are not enough. So we now know that they are not enough to limit the warming to 1.5. So they have now, for in the COP26, they have to submit pledges, like really ambitious pledges, and commit to rapid changes and transformation on all the systems. So apparently, I mean, Biden has been doing some pledges, and I mean, public pledges. So I'm quite surprised that they didn't sign anything. But in any case, yeah, the governments know this information. All the governments in the world knows this information. They knew it before, and we, in this report, we just like say it again, that there is enough. They have to do something, and I want to hope that they are going to actually do some serious work on the negotiations in this COP26 and come out with something that will prove to the world that we still have hope.
I would like to add to that I think right now something that came out quite strongly in 1.5 and the other reports since then from the Ipcc is that everybody has a very important role to play. So it's not just the private sector and it's not just governments, but each one of us as individuals in different forums like this, like the Fridays for Future movements that even in the past US administration, when the US withdrew from the Paris Agreement, you had a lot of activity from the private sector, from the finance, from universities and cities and counties. And I think that's, even though the US is back in, I think that we shouldn't lose that momentum.
Yes, and I was going just to give you this question. If we that are not legislators, we are having voices, we are researching, we are trying to make the world better and cleaner, and just this clean energy economy for everybody, and just with the basic needs that we need as human beings to have a great life. If we do what we need to do, and politicians doesn't make or execute these environmental policies, can we get this objective of 1.5? I mean, can we get there, or we're going to be worse? Because if the public does what they have to do in every single country, but legislators do not make these environmental policies for enterprises to get out, from for mining to get off, like just make these environmental policies that we need for everybody to have a clean living, like the indigenous community are right now fighting for their rights, because they're going to have enterprises over there just to mine their lands, just to get away from their homes, and they're transforming their homes in industrialization lands. So if we do what we have to do, is sufficient, or we need the environmental policies from the presidents, the legislatures, the senates, the parliament to say, yes, we need to execute right now what we need to do 1,000 years before this global warming that we are getting to?
No, I mean, yes, we all have to push and do our job, and we all have to be, reuse and recycle and blah, blah, blah. So we have to do as well our personal commitment. And if the governments refuse to do it, then the governments work for us in a democratic countries, they work for us. So we still have the power of the vote. And I know in Latin America, it's kind of a joke, the vote, and, but we still have that power. So if the governments refuse to do what they have to do, secure a habitable planet for everybody, then we have the power to remove them, and we have the power to demand from them to do their jobs. So now they cannot say, I didn't know this, so here is information. So I think everybody has to do from their own personal commitment, and to get informed and to do all the changes that we need to do. And by doing that, also to demand the government to do their job. I mean, they have to. It's not that they want or not, they have to, and we have the power to demand from them to do their job.
And just as we have that power, as Ruth just mentioned, I think we also have that power with the private sector. If there's a company, for example, that doesn't follow certain practices, or that doesn't have any commitments, we also have the power to decide who we buy from and how we use certain products. So I think that the societal choices have a strong voice, can have a stronger voice.
Well, this is so easy to say, but in practice it's very difficult. We cannot understand that togetherness can break through politicians, and can break through legislatures, and can break through even United Nations. We need togetherness in every single country to understand that if we go against what Debbie and Ruth are saying, against the enterprises, against the only one that are working for us, because as you tell us, Ruth, they work for us, and we do not we have to literally just order them what to do, Yes, Ruth.
No. I agree totally. I agree.
In every single country is the same thing. Yes, please.
No, it sounds like, let's go and demand to the government. But actually, as you say, if we come together, they will have to do it. I mean, it's the power of the people, and the power of demand, and the power of the people that are informed. So I think that's basic, to get informed, and to get informed by appropriate sources, like not by a Twitter of whoever, or or it's just there is all the evidence, and if you doubt of what we are saying here, you please verify all the evidence. We are not making up these numbers. There's all the evidence. You can download all the information. You can see all the papers that were used and reviewed. So it's not that we are making up the numbers, and you can doubt what me I'm saying, or Debbie, but there is all the information. So please get informed and demand the proper actions from ourselves and from the governments.
Debbie?
Yes, I know that at least on the side of Ipcc, there's been a lot of questions of how to make the information and the science more available. I know that right now there's, like Ruth mentioned, the atlas. We have the technical summaries besides the chapters, and there's just a wealth of information, and that I think that having good, reliable information is the basis. Also keeping in mind that Ipcc assesses knowledge. So we assess the knowledge and produce these studies for governments to use, well, and the public in general. So for example, in 1.5, well, in the 3 special reports, there's a suite of options that can be used not only by governments, but by, other entities, other actors. And it's, just like showing where that information is coming from, and showing what are the different options, for example, that can be implemented.
The special report that is going going to get out on February or on March, does it gives the same kind of information that we already know, or it's new information, or just research on the same information but just very deep in their research?
Well, the coming out in March is the working group 2's contribution to AR6. So it's not a special report, it's like the main report. So that focuses on impacts, vulnerability, and adaptation. And in March, in April, we should have the main contribution of working group 3, which is on mitigation. So working group 2 is mainly looking at what are the different impacts that we've seen, since the last assessment cycle, 2014, and then looking into what are the different adaptation options and climate resilient development pathways. And then working group 3 looks mainly at the mitigation side.
Right. So Ruth and Debbie, this is a very quick question for you, but very important one. If you were in United Nations right now with that microphone that we all know, and you have every single president in front of you, every single legislator from every single country of the planet watching you, what will your words will be for all of them?
Oof. I think I would say that we have to act now. We don't have time anymore to think and to get together and discuss if we want, if it is convenient for me, for my economy. It's not time. We don't have time anymore for that. We have to act now. We have now here all the paths or all the evidence. So here is the information. So now please take a decision that will lead us to limit the warming to no more than 1.5. So now, stop the discussion and stop the blah, blah, blah. We have to act now.
Debbie?
I would start by also making reference to another study. It was a joint report between Ipcc that looks at biodiversity and Ipcc. And just focus on the importance that nature has in protecting the planet and protecting, I think it was Secretary General Guterres who said, like, let's protect our home, or something in that sense, that we need to protect the environment. We live here, that's our only home. And I mean, at the end of it, nature can survive without humans, not so the other way around. So we're giving you the tools, we're giving you the science, as Ruth said. And of course, the Ipcc author team is always available to answer questions.
I think I have no words. You said it all. So thank you so much, Ruth, and thank you so much, Debbie, for the information, for your wisdom, for every single word that you said here. Thank you so much for being with us here.
Thank you a lot for the invitation and for the opportunity to keep showing to the world these findings. So thank you very much.
I formally invite you to say it in Spanish, all of this in our section from Lima, Vision, that is a sustainable perspective versus the cruelty of cultural reality. So thank you so much for being with us. This was Ipcc Decode, debrief of Ipcc reports. And these two amazing women that bring their wisdom, their hearts, and their minds to us to show us that we don't have time. There's no time, like Ruth and Debbie said, for just chatting and just bluffing and just making strategies. We know what we need to do, and legislators and presidents know what they need to do. So action is right now the word that everybody has to have in their hearts and their minds. Take action, because there's no time for just a chat. Thank you for following us. Thank you for this amazing time that we share with you at your home. Thank you for all the wonderful tables that we had today. And now we're going to say bye-bye to this international coordination of every single table that we had these 3 days of the historical Environmental Law Congress and academic amazing guest speakers that we had today. Do not go away. We have a lot more for you.